Something pulls at you, not a thought exactly, not a feeling you can name, more like a direction, a low, persistent lean toward something you know does not serve you, and you resist it. For a while, sometimes for a long time. Then you stop resisting, and afterward you explain it to yourself in language that sounds reasonable, but underneath the explanation, if you are honest, for even 3 seconds, you know the explanation came after. The pull came first. You did not decide. Something in you decided. And then the thinking part caught up and wrote a reason. This happens more often than you know, more often than you are comfortable admitting, and the question is not why you do this. The question is, what exactly is the thing that is pulling? Because it is not you. Not the you that is watching right now. It is something older than that. Something that does not think in words. Something that has been running since long before you had language to describe it. And it has been making decisions on your behalf your entire life. You have acted in a way that you cannot fully explain. Not to someone else, to yourself. You said something you did not plan to say. Felt something you did not expect to feel. Reacted in a way that did not feel like you. Except it was you. That is the part no one talks about. Not the behavior, the recognition after. That brief moment where you look at what you just did and something inside you goes quiet. Because you do not know which version of you that was, or whether the version watching is any more real than the version that just acted. There is something you do that you have never once noticed. Not something dramatic, not something dark, something quiet. You replay conversations in your head that are already over, not to learn from them, not to fix them, just to replay them. Sometimes the conversation happened 3 years ago, and you are still arguing your side to no one. In a room you are sitting alone in, notice that for a second. You are not thinking about the past. You are living in it. And the strangest part is that you did not choose to go there. Something took you, and when you finally come back to the room you are actually in, you do not even notice you were gone. That is the first thing. Not philosophy, not teaching, just what the mind does when no one is watching it. And here is something else. You have made a decision before, a clear one, told yourself it was final. Then weeks later you were back, doing the exact same thing you decided not to do. Feeling the same thing you decided you were done feeling, choosing the same person or situation or habit that you had already named as the problem, not because you forgot your decision, but because something in you did not agree with it, something you never actually spoke to. Watch this closely. The decision was made in the conscious mind, but the one who kept returning, that was something older, something that does not respond to logic, something that does not care about your plans. That is the part this video is actually about. Before you respond to something painful, before the words leave your mouth, before the action happens, there is a gap, a very small one. In that gap, something moves. Not thought exactly. Something faster than thought. It is more like a flinch, a contraction, a pulling back or a lunging forward. And by the time you become aware of it, you are already in the middle of reacting, not responding. Reacting. The reaction was not chosen. It was inherited. This is the part most people miss. They believe they are responding to what is happening now, but in most cases, they are responding to something that happened before. The event in front of them is just the trigger. The real charge was loaded years ago. Think about the last time you felt suddenly, disproportionately angry. The anger was not the size of the event. It was much bigger, because it was not just about the event. It was about every time before that felt like this event, every dismissal, every moment of being unheard, every time someone made you feel small and you said nothing. And now one small thing, one look, one sentence, one silence, and all of it arrives at once. You did not get angry. Something in you finally ran out of room to hold it. Ancient observations of the human mind noticed this particular pattern thousands of years ago, not as a flaw, not as something to be ashamed of, as a mechanism, a predictable, observable mechanism that operates without permission. They called it by many names, but the description was always the same. The mind does not experience the present. It experiences its interpretation of the present, filtered through everything it has already decided. Every new moment is being sorted by an old filing system. You have done this before. You met someone new, and within minutes, sometimes seconds, you had already decided something about them. Not consciously, unconsciously, something in them reminded you of something, a pattern you recognized, a shape of energy you had felt before, and the old story began playing. Even though the person in front of you was not the person the story was written about. And sometimes you were right, but sometimes you spent months relating to someone who was not there, someone you had assembled from memory, and the actual person was standing right in front of you the whole time, and you never quite saw them. That is not a character flaw. That is how an unexamined mind operates by default. There is a loop. You probably know it without knowing you know it. Something feels wrong, not catastrophically wrong, just off. A low, persistent discomfort. A restlessness with no clear address. So you reach for something. A phone, a conversation, a distraction, an argument, a fantasy. Anything to change the channel. And it works. For a little while, then the feeling returns, sometimes stronger. So you reach again. This is the loop. Not an addiction in the traditional sense, something more fundamental. The mind encountering discomfort and immediately, reflexively moving toward relief. Not resolution, relief. These are not the same thing. Resolution means the source of the discomfort is addressed. Relief means it is temporarily covered. The mind, left unexamined, almost always chooses relief. Because relief is faster, because resolution requires sitting with something long enough to understand it. And sitting with it is uncomfortable, so the mind moves away. And the loop continues. Watch this closely. The things you are most uncomfortable doing without, the habits, the patterns, the attachments, most of them are not things you genuinely want. They are things the mind reaches for when it wants to not feel something. There is a difference. One is a desire, the other is an escape route. And the mind rarely tells you which is which. There is something even more specific here. Have you noticed how certain thoughts return on schedule? Not randomly, but in particular conditions. When you are alone, when things are quiet, right before you fall asleep, the mind, when deprived of external stimulation, returns to unfinished emotional business. Not because it wants to solve it, but because it was never metabolized. An experience happened, an emotion was generated, but it was not felt fully. It was interrupted by busyness, by performance, by the next thing, and so it remained in a kind of suspension, and the mind keeps returning to it the way a tongue keeps returning to a broken tooth, not to fix it, just because it is unfinished. This is why silence is uncomfortable for most people. Not because silence is painful, but because silence removes the noise that was keeping certain things from being noticed. People do not fear silence. They fear what becomes audible in it. There is a structure in the mind that is entirely devoted to one thing. Not your happiness, not your growth, not even your survival in any serious sense. Continuity. It is devoted to keeping the story of you intact. It monitors every situation for threats. Not physical threats, narrative threats. Anything that suggests that the story you hold about yourself might be wrong. And when it detects that, when something or someone challenges who you believe you are, it does not respond. It reacts. Defensiveness. Deflection. Sudden memory of the other person's flaws. The need to win an argument that did not need to be won. These are not emotional failures. They are the mind doing exactly what it was built to do. Protect the story. The problem is this: the story is not you. It is a collection of decisions about what kind of person you are, what you deserve, what is safe, what is allowed. Some of those decisions were made when you were very young, when you did not have the information you have now, when the world was smaller and the rules were written by people who were also running their own old programs. And yet those decisions are still running, right now, underneath everything, shaping what you notice, what you ignore, what you pursue, what you sabotage. Not maliciously, mechanically. You have an opportunity, something genuinely good, something that aligns with what you say you want, and you hesitate, not logically. Not because you examined it and found it flawed. You hesitate because something in you does not believe it. Specifically, something in you does not believe that you are the kind of person this happens to. So you wait, you delay, you find small reasons, and sometimes the window closes, and the mind immediately constructs a story about why it was never going to work anyway. Not because the story is true, because the story protects the continuity. If the opportunity was real and you let it pass, that says something about you, and the mind cannot let that stand. So it rewrites every time. Ancient observations of mind spoke about this with remarkable precision. There is an old understanding that the mind creates a self and then spends all of its resources defending that self. The tragedy is not the defense itself. The tragedy is that what is being defended does not need defending. It is not actually threatened, but the mechanism does not know that. It was built in conditions where the threat was real, and it cannot update until something outside its normal operation is introduced. That something is attention, not effort, not discipline, not trying harder, just watching. Watching what the mind does without immediately believing it. This is the part most people miss. You did not think that thought. The thought arose. There is a difference so significant that once you see it, you cannot fully unsee it. Most people operate from the assumption that they are the thinker, that thoughts are produced by them, under their direction. But sit quietly for 5 minutes. Do not try to think. Do not try to not think. Just watch. And notice what happens. Thoughts arrive, without invitation, without announcement, one after another. Some of them you would never consciously choose. Some of them disturb you. Some of them contradict what you believe about yourself. Where do they come from? The honest answer is, you do not know. No one has ever produced a satisfying account of why a specific thought arrives at a specific moment. And yet we build entire identities around these uninvited arrivals. We say, I think, therefore I am. But what if the more accurate observation is this? Thoughts happen, and I am the one who notices them. That gap between the thought and the one who notices is the entire territory that serious inquiry into the mind has mapped. Not to teach you peace, not to teach you calm, but because in that gap is the only place where something actually changes. You have had a thought that you immediately judged as wrong, or shameful, or unacceptable, and the judgment arrived so fast that the thought and the judgment seemed simultaneous, but they were not. There was a thought. Then there was a reaction to the thought. Then there was identification with the reaction. You are not the thought. You are not even the judgment of the thought. You are the one who is aware of both. But because this happens so fast, because the mechanism is so practiced, most people never find that third position. They are always inside the thought, or inside the reaction to the thought, never watching from outside. And from inside, you cannot see the shape of the thing. You are too close. You are part of it. You have done this. Something happened that made you feel something, and you immediately narrated it. You told yourself a story about what it meant, about what it said about you, about what it said about them, about how this connects to everything else. The story started before the feeling finished. because the mind is uncomfortable with raw experience. It wants to categorize, to contextualize, to know. Knowing feels safer than feeling. So, the mind reaches for story the moment something feels unresolved. And the story is almost never accurate. Not because you are dishonest, because the story is assembled from old parts, from previous experiences, from conclusions already drawn. The mind does not narrate what happened. It narrates what it already believes. And you experience that narration as perception, as what is real, as what is true. There is a kind of suffering that is not dramatic, not grief, not crisis, not the kind of pain that announces itself. A low, persistent friction, the feeling of being slightly out of alignment, of moving through days that feel correct on paper but hollow in some way you cannot name. This is the most common form of psychological suffering, and it is the least examined, because it does not feel bad enough to address. It is tolerable, manageable, normal enough, and so people carry it for years, decades, adjusting to it, building a life around it, not because they have given up, but because they never identified it as something that could be different. Old investigations into the nature of mind observed something that has not changed, that most of what humans experience as suffering is not caused by what is happening. It is caused by the relationship the mind has with what is happening, the story it tells, the resistance it generates, the comparison it constantly runs between what is and what it believes should be. That gap between what is and what should be is where most psychological pain actually lives. Not in the event, in the argument with the event. The mind in most people is running a constant audit, checking every moment against a standard, finding most moments lacking, and then generating a low-level emotional static that colors everything. And because it is constant, people stop noticing it. The way you stop hearing a refrigerator hum the moment it becomes ambient. But it is there, running, generating a quiet argument with ordinary life. Watch this closely. You have wanted something, and gotten it, and the getting felt good for a very specific, very limited window of time. Then, the wanting returned, redirected, slightly escalated, towards something else, or toward a larger version of the same thing. And you told yourself that this next thing would actually satisfy it, would actually complete something, but the mechanism never completes. Not because you are broken, because the mechanism of wanting is not designed to be satisfied. It is designed to generate motion, to keep the organism moving toward more resources, more security, more connection. This served a function in conditions very different from the ones most people live in now. But the mechanism does not know about different conditions. It is running the same program in a world that program was not designed for. And so, people spend their lives chasing the horizon, not noticing that the horizon moves with them, not because they are foolish, because no one showed them what the mechanism actually is. Most people who become interested in the mind want the mind to become something different, quieter, more cooperative, less likely to produce suffering. And this is where the problem starts, because the desire to change the mind is itself a movement of the mind. The part that wants things to be different is the same part that produces the suffering, running the same basic operation. This is what ancient investigations kept returning to, not a paradox for its own sake, a genuine structural observation about how the mind operates. You cannot use the mechanism to fix the mechanism. You can only observe it. And in the observation, something shifts. Not because the mind becomes different, but because your relationship to it changes. You are no longer fully inside it, no longer fully identified with every movement it makes. And in that small space, that gap that opens between the event and the reaction, between the thought and the belief, something is possible that was not possible before. Not peace, exactly. not the absence of difficulty, more like perspective. The difference between being caught in weather and being able to see the weather, both are real, but only one allows you to navigate. There is a specific moment that people who have done serious self-inquiry describe. Not enlightenment, not transformation. Something smaller, more ordinary. A moment when they were in the middle of a pattern, a familiar loop, the old reaction forming, the old story beginning, and for a fraction of a second, they noticed it, saw it happening, not from outside their life, from inside it, but with something slightly different available, a small amount of space, and in that space they did not do what they would have done before, not because they were better, not because they tried harder, but because they were watching, and you cannot fully be what you are watching. That is the only thing worth saying. Watch, not to fix, not to change, not even to understand, just to watch. What moves in you when you are threatened, what the mind reaches for when it is uncomfortable, what the story sounds like when it is constructing itself. Watch it. Become slightly more familiar with the machinery. Not because the machinery will stop, but because you will stop mistaking it for who you are. You came here probably looking for something practical, a technique, a method, a set of steps, and instead you got a description of things you already knew in some pre-verbal way, patterns you have felt but never quite named, loops you have run without knowing you were running them, and now you have names for some of them. That changes nothing outside. The situations are the same, the people are the same, the mind will still move the way it moves, but something is slightly different now, not because you know more, because you noticed something that you were already inside without knowing you were inside it. And now, when it happens again, and it will happen again, there will be a moment, a fraction of a second, where something in you recognizes it, where the mechanism is seen before it has fully run. That moment, that fraction of a second, that is not nothing. That may be the only place where anything real ever actually begins. Nothing changed outside. But now you see it differently.